Hello. If you've watched any of the Brennan Lee Mulligan DM'd sessions of Dimension 20, or listened to Worlds Beyond Number, or seen Critical Role Calamity, you'll be familiar with Brennan Lee Mulligan's unique style of introducing player characters. Essentially what it boils down to is Brennan doing a little bit of one-on-one roleplay with whatever player's character is about to be introduced. We learn what's important to that character, we meet a couple of the NPCs that are surrounding that character. In general, we just see that specific character set up as a character.
I'm gonna go ahead and roll to see which of our PCs will go first. We follow a little whisk of snow. Snow settles on a windowsill, and in a dingy little medical office, we see our friend Pete the Plug. Allie, could you go ahead and describe your character for the group?
Brennan sets up each character like this individually and then comes around and introduces all of the characters to each other in some sort of classic D&D style setup. I think it's fair to say that most DMs generally cut straight to the party meeting each other. That way everyone gets to play right away, you can test out what role-playing with each other is like, and you can deliver the hook for the overarching campaign early and without having to worry about the personal character's goals interrupting the campaign hook. Most campaigns start in the tavern, not what the character was up to before they went to the tavern that day. But the way that Brennan does it has a lot of pros, especially if you're doing a roleplay heavy campaign where it's important to know a lot about the characters playing.
The one and only Sokbar the Bog Lord.
Hello. Mike, please tell us what your character's up to.
Not only that, but this style of introduction gives you a lot of NPCs that you're going to be able to refer back to later in the story.
I'm banned! I am banished from the kingdom!
Yes, you're banned from the kingdom.
Instead of meeting someone and knowing that they're a part of your backstory and then hearing from the DM what you know about them and how you know them, you get to actually interact with them early and then revisit them later.
That sword is banned. Get a new sword that is sharp.
You see that he looks at the sword like it's poison in his hand and hurls it through a stained glass window.
No!
And also, as a DM, it lets you create a really compelling hook. Because you already know the motivations of each character, you can craft the hook very specifically for something they all share.
Do you always work for the Lord of Shadows, Mom?
And of course, it's important to have the players, or rather the player characters, share something. But that's achieved in a session 0. And additionally, all of the players will also know the characters without having to sort of suss it out in that tavern scene. I know for my home games, often character introductions devolve into a bit of a like, I'm 4 feet tall, I'm a rogue, I'm a halfling, my parents are dead, I desperately want revenge. Rather than getting that all out of the way with the DM first, everyone kind of knowing about it, and then you get to just hop right into playing your character instead of summarizing them. So, a Brennan Lee Mulligan style introduction might be great for you, but there are ways it can go very wrong. So let's talk about how to get it right. First and foremost, you cannot have each introductory storyline be vital to the overarching plot. It can't be your story that you're setting up. It has to be the character.
Riva, as you sit there looking at your streaming captain, calling out these helpful things to grant advantage where you are able, bubbles move around in your watery comms station, and we return to Agua Tunisia. Many years ago.
It's like how when you talk about plots in a book, you talk about an inciting incident. But in general, those inciting incidents are not the first thing that happens in the book. You set up the character first, and then you have your inciting incident. This is that character setup before the inciting incident. Secondly, and I think this one is also extremely important, give your player that's having their character introduced most of the power in the scene.
To your other side is Lieutenant Alvin, who is a
chipmunk.
A chipmunk. This little chipmunk. We're gonna fuck him up! You see that...
Wait, I have a question. Once we say it, it becomes canon. It's in there now.
Anything you say becomes canon.
Obviously, you cannot give them enough leash to break your world, but because these are characters and settings that are important to them as players and characters, let them flesh it out. You'll see Brennan do this a lot. He'll ask what the character remembers about a person from their past, or how they would describe seeing something.
Norm, on this day as you're being decorated, what's going through your head this many years in the past?
If you have setups that you need to accomplish, something that's important to the world, or an NPC that you're going to rely on later, so you need to set them up, then do that. I'm not saying that you have to take those things out of your repertoire. What I am saying is the stuff that either doesn't really matter or is very flavorful should be in the hands of the player whose character you're setting up, because it's their character and this is their part of the story.
When we see Captain Norman, the skipper Takamori, what does he look like?
Ask them what they look like, ask them what their home looks like, ask them what their parents look like if they're still alive. Ask them how they feel about things, ask them what their favorite things are. Just ask a bunch of questions and let them paint out their own character.
What am I?
The beauty of giving the power to the player is that when all of these things crop back up, which they have to just because this character is going to be a massive part of the story, it's a player character. When they crop back up, the player is that much more connected with it because they're the ones that built it. They built this character in stats and also now in flavor. They built the little world that the character inhabits, you know, in as many strokes as you allow them. And now when we see it again, we see their home, we see the NPCs that are important to them, we see the things that they were able to flesh out because you asked them a bunch of questions. Well, they care a lot about it because it came out of their own head.
So you wish for me to have a pointed sword so that when I tickle my friend, it hurts
Take
him?
it back, go outside, and get that sword.
Can you toss me my sword back? The sword comes through an unbroken window next to the broken one. Second one breaks, sword scatters.
Yes, we really need a win.
Third, and this one relates a lot to the last point, don't let them gain objective benefits from their introduction. Players like to seize opportunities, which is totally justified. How else do you get ahead? But because of that ability to seize good opportunities, players are often good at recognizing when you've handed them power. And if you give them the ability to build a small section of the world, well, they're probably going to build it so that they are the most benefited.
I probably have some kind of like really fancy like gem or something, right?
Yeah.
For instance, you might ask the player what their character has used to decorate their living space, and seeing that this is now their decision to make, they elect to tell you that they've decorated it with a bunch of valuable arms and armor that they would otherwise not have access to, and probably just like chests full of gems and jewels and gold coins probably, right? Because that looks nice for a room to be decorated with. And those are things that level 1 characters should not have at the start of a campaign. Really, any characters probably shouldn't just start with lockboxes full of jewels, but I mean, that's your prerogative. But if there's something like this that is going to totally unbalance the game, you have to find ways to reel it back. They can have broken arms and armor that they've collected from around town. They can have replica arms and armor. What's the reason for them having arms and armor? They might have lockboxes full of emotionally valuable items, but those things aren't going to be able to actually sell for a ton because, well, they're important to the character, not to the world. Because if they were important to the world, and everyone in the world, it would be unbalanced. This is where I point out that Brennan Lee Mulligan's introduction style works fantastic in a professional setting, because his players all know that this is an ongoing story that they are contributing to as a character.
I take it off and I flick it to the peasant into his cola bucket.
He goes, punk, and he says, "Oh dear, looks like the princesses have escaped again." He continues, he says, "We'll put it in the gem pile when we get back to the farm."
This is more than a game for them, and they know that, they're aware of that. In home games, it's a little bit harder to pull off, because for a lot of people, this is an escapism fantasy, and they're trying to level up fast and be powerful, because that's the escape of it all. And to be fair, that might be a reason why this, isn't gonna work for your home game, and that's totally fine. If you are trying to run a story-heavy, character-heavy campaign, it might be great, but you have to still be aware that these people are trying to level up. These characters are trying to get stronger, they're trying to be better off in the world, and that's also a goal that their characters will have. So as long as you can impart the importance of the story and the character on your players, then this should work fine. There's nothing wrong with escapist fantasies, that's kind of the whole point. But if you're already living out the escapist fantasy at the beginning of the campaign, well, then there's no point in going on the adventure. You have to build them. You gotta build to the fantasy. And finally, in order to achieve this Brennan Lee Mulligan introduction style, you can't have stakes that are too high. If your player's character is at risk of death or being locked up immediately upon introduction, it's probably not how it should have gone. I have absolutely done this. I once placed a player's character in a situation that was too high stakes, and that player did basically everything they could to get arrested for treason as quickly as they could. And I can't really hold it against them because, it's what their character would do. And also they were having fun. And also I placed them in a situation in which what else was there to do? It was very much my fault, but it's a great reminder that, Your stakes for an introduction probably don't need to be that high. Remember, this is a character in their everyday life before the grand adventure begins. And you can sort of mislead with stakes, like a character that is going to be combat heavy can start in a fight, but then after the fight's over, it's revealed that it was a training fight, or it was, a bar fight in which no one was swinging to kill. But the goal at this point for no one is to eliminate a character from the campaign. So make sure that you are setting up situations in which they can't be. So, in short, for a Brennan Lee Mulligan style introduction, focus on the characters and who they are as people. Avoid tying those characters too closely to the main plot too early. Give the player the power to flesh out their own little bubble of the world. Avoid the players completely unbalancing the game by gifting themselves stuff, and keep the stakes low. Stick to those rules, you will probably be able to achieve a really good Brennan Lee Mulligan style of introduction. And if you do that, please let me know. I would love to hear about people that are in home games instead of professionals doing these personal introductions. Okay, bye.